Welcome to the IVM Podcast Network.
You're listening to My Neighbour Zuckerberg.
Hello, dear listener. Welcome to another episode of My Neighbour Zuckerberg. I'm host number 1, Munaf Kapadia.
And I'm host number 2, Nabil Merchant.
At My Neighbour Zuckerberg, we invite guests who are incredibly ordinary people. These are people who eat the same food that all of us eat. Okay, These are people who breathe the same air. Some of them might have even shared an Uber with you recently and you didn't realize. But you know what makes them extraordinary?
It's their journey. It's their journey that they are willing to embark. The one that involves them letting go of that monthly paycheck and bracing complete uncertainty.
Becoming Frodo Baggins.
Absolutely. They become the ring bearer for, for the problems that they're trying to solve, for the opportunities that they're trying to take advantage of.
Right. So, at this stage, we'd like to introduce a guest who I'm incredibly excited about.
So we've got, the founder of The Great Next. TheGreatNext.com is an adventure portal. Amit Thaker is our guest for today. He's taken a lot of trouble and a lot of research to actually put this entire portal or platform together. And it's easily one of the best adventure portals that we have in India. It's so interesting that it's got so much of information, about each adventure trip that they have, right from paragliding to scuba diving to rafting to rock climbing, weekend trips, treks,
to
multiple things.
At the LOC. That's the latest one. It's trending, I've heard.
So Amit's journey is fantastic, and it's important that we have his story out there, right from being in the US, in his early 20s to actually being a individual hiker, to actually conducting tours in the US, then finally coming back to India, working in a digital marketing agency, focusing his entire work on travel, and then finally taking the plunge and beginning The Great Next. Amit, tell us more about your journey.
Thanks for that introduction, guys. Thank you very much. The journey's been pretty long. I am a Bombay boy. I started working as a guide for adventure travel companies back in 97, 98.
Wow.
I'm really old, yeah. So when I was still in college, great job, one of the best jobs I've ever had. Got to travel. Went for my bachelor's to the US. Came back. After I came back, I was like, yeah, I can't join a job straight away, right? So I took a year off, a gap year. Back then, the phrase gap year didn't exist, right? Mm-hmm. So I took a gap year and worked. I didn't have any money to travel, so I worked again as a guide. The good thing about that year was I traveled across the country with adventure travel companies, taking groups, school groups, college groups, corporates, individuals, to all kinds of trips.
So this is your early 20s, like, right?
This
when
is
you were
early
out
20s,
of college.
23, 24, yes.
Wow.
I worked through college. I paid for my own college degree. Back then, it was easier to work legally in the US. This was pre 9/11.
Right.
So I was pretty much through a midlife crisis at 23 because I spent 4 years in the US trying to finish a 4-year degree in 3 years, working 2 jobs, sometimes 3 jobs simultaneously to pay for my education. So I came back and I'm like, you know what? I need a break at 23, right? And otherwise, I'm going to lose my mind.
So all the treks were in the US, right? So your graduation
there was
in the US?
some treks in the US, but when I came back to India, I took a gap year in India.
Okay.
Yeah. So worked for adventure travel companies, traveled across this country, Himalayas, Lakshadweep, scuba diving.
Wow, at 21, 22.
At 23, yeah.
Wow.
So it was a great time, right? I remember every time I would come back from a trip, people would be complaining, I got to go back to work on Monday. Amit, what are you going to do? I was like, Monday I'm at home, but Tuesday I'm heading off to Sikkim, right? So people would hate me on the way back on these trips.
And this is at a time when there is no such concept of social media and like putting up updates and saying, Lakshadweep
nothing. That pressure wasn't there.
I'd like to ask a question right up front. even things which you're most passionate about, if you just keep on doing it, they get boring. Did
That's
that
true.
ever happen with...
It did. It did. I actually tried to start my own adventure travel company as an operator, ground operator back then. And partly I was too naive. I didn't have any money. I didn't know how business worked.
Yeah.
I didn't understand marketing. But that's also one of those things, right? The trek to Matharan, for example, is beautiful, right? But if you do it 8 times, 9 times a year, it can get pretty frustrating, right? And that's one thing I realized back then, that that's not what I want to do.
Right.
I don't want to take different people to the same destination over and over again, right? I wanted to do my adventure at my, at my will.
God, I love
right?
this, yeah.
But it was still a great year, right? I mean, I compared it to a lot of my peers, and they spent it, working in a bank or, things like that. And I was like, hey, I have no money, but, I've been to Sikkim 3 times this year. What did you do, right? And they were like, yeah, I went to the mall. So it was pretty good, right? But it was not a comparison, but I was like, I'm glad I didn't go to the mall, right? I mean, it was about me. It was not about, what other people were doing.
That's insane. I love that line, Amit.
Yeah.
It's about your adventure.
Yeah, it was about my adventure. And so actually, shortly after that is when the idea actually struck. So I'm talking 2003 is when the idea actually germinated. I worked with a lot of adventure operators who didn't know how to do marketing. They didn't know sales. They didn't know how city people thought. And they were like, yeah, Amit, why don't you join us as sales? You speak good English. You know city folk.
Right, and you're passionate about this.
Yeah, and you're passionate and you understand the sport.
Right.
And I had a lot of friends who told me that, hey, Amit, you've done a lot of this adventure. Why don't you tell us where to go next, right, for our next holiday?
Right.
So that grew, over the years. I got into digital because, again, adventure didn't pay the bills. So I got into digital. And then somewhere around 2007, 2006, the idea became solid. And I knew this is something that had to be built. And 10 years later, here I am, I just built it. Yeah, but it had to be built.
Can we get Amit to do some of the script writing for My Neighbour Zuckerberg? Seriously, each and every, and I actually mean this on a very serious note, you reek of
cheesy lines
of what it means to be an entrepreneur. He's literally inspiring me.
And he's held his passion, his vision for more than a decade, man. I mean, just think about that. And how many of us?
How was that?
How did you manage to do that? Right. So
that's
it was
entrepreneurial constitution.
It was hard. That's exactly what it was. It was hard because the number of people who I respected, including people in the digital space who told me this is the worst idea ever. Why don't you stick to why don't you stick to the daily grind in the cubicle, and that'll be a lot better for you. Especially because then at the end of it you can buy a house, you can buy a fridge, you can buy a washing machine, and, and you can get the platinum credit card and an iPhone or whatever. And I was like, thanks, but pass.
I like Android.
Yeah. Something like that, yeah.
But dude, what's your biggest adventure? What's the most exciting thing that you ever did?
What's the most exciting thing I did would be... that's a tough question. There's been a whole bunch of adventures that have really pushed me, right? If I go back 10 years, I did a basic mountaineering course in Sikkim. That was something else. To be in the shadow of the Kanchenjunga at 17, 18,000 feet, not on the Kanchenjunga, in the shadow of it, but is something else. And that course really puts you through, some tough times, right? So I learned a lot there. I saw a lot there, but the raw beauty of the Himalayas is something that I truly saw, actually in Sikkim. Spectacular stuff. So that would be up there. Last year, I went scuba diving in Philippines. I just got certified there.
Congratulations.
Thank you. That was something else. Philippines as a country is spectacular. Their landscape is fantastic. And then, just you go underwater. And we were down to almost 35, 40 meters.
Wow, that's
different
a
world.
lot.
Different world.
That's
different
a lot.
world.
Head-popping scenes.
So, off the top of my head, those are a couple of things that come to mind. My wife and I did a 6-month sabbatical around the world.
Wow.
Of which...
the great wife. Sorry.
The great
3
way.
years ago, we did 6 months around the world, and of that 3 months was a road trip from New York to San Francisco. That
A road trip from New York to San Francisco.
How
Over
many,
3
like,
months.
How long is that distance again? Can you just
It's about 4,200 miles, but because we went zigzag, we did 8,000 miles.
That is incredible. That is incredible.
Yeah.
But
So
you-
that trip had
It's a
only
good
great
thing.
moments.
Yeah, it's a good thing. Fuel is cheaper.
You'll be surprised how cheap
that must have been
a
very
trip like that
amazing,
is.
right? So from New York to San Francisco, okay, and
Yes.
that you completed an entire trip in 3 months.
Yeah. 90 nights, of which 70 were in a tent. The rest 20 in, about 65 in a tent, the rest in friends' houses or hotels.
Wow. You know what intrigues me is how did you find the great wife to complement something like the great next? Yeah, because from what you're saying, it sounds like your companion is totally in sync with.
She is.
Yeah.
She's a co-founder in the Great Next.
Oh.
She writes all our content, and she runs a content team and runs our social media. And
All right, guys, it's time for a break. We're just taking a very quick trek and coming back.
Hey guys, this is Malika Singhania, co-founder of the blog Stylogram, where we cover trends, fashion forecasts, celebrity style, tips and tricks, and lots more cool stuff. So tune in every Thursday to the Stylogram podcast, your weekly style telegram, giving you the latest fashion and beauty stories that are relevant to you. You can also subscribe to our show on iTunes, SoundCloud, Audio Boom, or any other local podcast app. See you soon.
Guys, we're back after that lovely trek. Okay, I'm going to dive into the details of your venture. How did you finally get building this platform, an idea which you had treasured for such a long time?
so I worked in a digital agency for about 7-8 years. So after the whole, trekking in my early 20s and working as a freelancer, I did 12 years of corporate work. And then finally I got to a point where I was not happy with what I was doing, and I said, both of us won, me and my wife and I. And we said, okay, let's figure out what we want to do, but let's go on a 6-month sabbatical and then figure it out there, what we want to do. And obviously job opportunities were always an option, right? But we were
Right.
keen to do something on our own, right? So we hit the road. We spent a lot of time debating, should we take a job? We'll make more money. We can buy this and we can buy that. Or should we start something on our own, put all our savings into that, and then make some money down the road? And I mean, it was not as simple as that. It was a lot more complicated. And then finally we said, okay, let's see if this adventure travel platform makes sense. Mm-hmm. So we were in Thailand for about 3 months, and I started crunching some of the numbers, talking to friends, and then
On the beach while sipping
on
your
the
pina
beach.
colada.
Something like that.
You know.
Yeah. And then finally, it made more and more sense. I'm a very data-driven guy, so the idea was also, can we help our friends who are adventure tour operators get more sales and get more business, and so that they don't have to shut down and take corporate jobs, right? And that's why data was important, right? Like, can we actually make a business out of it? Not just to support ourselves, but to make it interesting for people who are actually on the forefront of adventure.
All the stakeholders involved.
Yeah.
Oh, this is interesting. This is a very interesting thought. Yeah.
So it
So
didn't make
basically
sense.
uplifting the entire ecosystem
Space,
per se, yeah.
exactly. And we were talking about safety earlier, right? A lot of reasons why a lot of operators cannot operate at global safety standards is because the amount of money they make, right? And because the average Indian traveler, even the adventure traveler, is haggling them down, right? So the guy's on wafer thin margins already, doesn't know
Right.
how to market his product. So we said, okay, we'll build this. And then the first option, my partner Mihir was a no-brainer, right? He's somebody I worked with 8-9 years. He's an award-winning designer, and you see it on the site. I mean, it's a beautiful site.
Oh yeah. It's
And
absolutely brilliant.
we get along really well. So that was a no-brainer. My wife was a no-brainer because she's great at content, and
Why are both of us laughing? No, we'll stop it. There's
so
nothing obvious
that
about
was
that.
that was the three of us, right? And then getting the tech pieces wasn't that difficult, but
Just for our listeners, because unfortunately a podcast is a non-visual medium. When Amit said getting the tech piece was not difficult, he gave us a thumbs down, indicating otherwise.
Of course, I mean, he's been in the digital marketing space for a good 10 years, man. I mean, it was just so easy for him to put everything together.
No, not true. It had its share of ups and downs. And anyone who's built a tech platform knows that. So that's the boring stuff, right? But yeah, and then, we got it going, and then, we put a lot of our own money in it. And we were lucky that we had a couple of friends who helped us out. But yeah, I mean, a little bit of money, a little bit of smarts, a little bit of content, a little bit of design.
The right team.
And the right team, and a lot of help, right? Like we've been very lucky. We've had people come out of the woodwork to help us, right? Like people we don't know, right? And they're like, hey, you know what? I can help you with this. And it's like, wow. How much will you charge us? And it's like, no, screw it. You can, when you make it big, we'll even it out. And that's been great, right? Like that's been one of the rewarding things about this journey in the last couple of years is people literally coming out of the woodwork to help us out on different fronts.
Munaf, actually, that really happens, right? So, the day you decide to plunge into building your own company or your own startup, right? Yeah. Suddenly you'll find, people actually relating to your own passion, and they say that, hey, you know what, we're going to help you build this.
And they're the real angels.
And they're the real angels. They're the real angels, right? Right. So that's what really helps. If you're all listening, I think... angel investing is what we're talking about, because that's become the more popular term that goes around.
That's the one where you go to church.
And you pray, and suddenly pots of money starts falling from above to build your venture. Anyways, yeah.
I love that, dude. There's a really good church in Fort where apparently it's 10x the ROI. But I think it's fairly safe to say all our listeners, when they listen to you, Amit, they're nodding their heads. Because many of these guys are entrepreneurs. Okay, they're all thinking about getting into that journey, or they're already on that journey. And help is probably the most understated resource which we all have access to. We just have to ask for it.
Yeah, you do. And sometimes in a lot of cases, we didn't even ask for it. When people just saw that we were passionate and we were chasing something and we were putting in hard work, right? And they just came out and said, I know you're not asking for help, but you know what? I can help you with this.
Wow.
And that was just bizarre for us, right? Especially in a city like Bombay that has the reputation of being cold, right? In these matters, right? And it's been spectacular.
Fantastic, man. Really good.
So, a life in the day of the great next. So, Munaf and I have gone to your site right now, and we are just browsing to this one particular scuba diving trip, right? And how would you explain this? So, it's so simple for us. I mean, we're getting all the information right now.
What's gone behind it?
What's behind it, right? I can see the cultural difficulty out here. I can see the cultural rating. I can see the difficulty level. I can see tons of information allowing me to actually, purchase this particular trip, right? And what's the, the back end behind it?
Like,
I mean, do you get in touch with?
Kind of, there are. I wish there were 12. There are only 6. But see, I've spent time on the other side where customers have called me and told me that, hey, I'd like to go for XYZ trip. So we went back to a lot of that, right? Like, what does somebody look for when they're looking for a trip? And there's no one answer, right? Different people are looking for different things. Somebody's looking for a destination, somebody's safety, somebody dates, somebody, how much am I going to trek per day? So we said, we thought of all the possible questions that somebody can ask for when booking a trip. And we said, we'll cram that all into a single page. And then Mihir, being the wonderful designer that he is, he made sure that made it look good and made it easy to consume. So that was the idea, right? Like that essentially, if you're willing to read, you will not need to call us or chat with us or speak to anyone, and you can just go ahead and book this site, because every possible question that you can think
is answered on the site.
Is answered on the site.
And that's insane, because I just imagine the problem he's solving. Yeah, like the first question that would go through my head when I'm thinking about booking a kayaking trip in India is like, damn, am I going to die?
Yeah, so the odds of you dying, actually, on a serious note, are extremely slim on any of our adventures, right? like I said, I mean, we've discussed that as a statistic before, and adventure in general is a lot safer than a lot of day-to-day activities. But nonetheless, coming back right to what you said, right, like we also spend a lot of time on the search algorithm, right, like as to how people search for trips, right, like so essentially we said that different people search differently for a trip. Somebody said, I want to go to Himachal, that's it. Somebody says, I want to go rafting, that's it. Somebody says, I want to go rafting in Himachal, that's it. So we have 20 different combinations of searches that you can make. The idea being that, if you're 5 guys in an office planning a trip and everyone has a different opinion, you can search for all of those simultaneously on our site and get multiple results. So you could look at rafting in Rishikesh versus scuba diving in Andamans on the same search result and compare the two.
Wow.
Right.
Okay.
So that's unprecedented, right? Like nobody in the adventure space or the tour space is doing that, not just in India or globally.
So as far as I understand, okay, there is, the customer, there is the adventure portal, the Great Next, and there's obviously an operator, right? What's your interaction with the operator? I mean, you must be making life so simple for them, but I'm sure you need to educate them as well about, the global standards that are, put down in terms of safety, in terms of rules and regulations, and try to impart that set of learnings into them as well, right? I mean,
yes and no, right?
Okay.
So right now we are focused on their one problem of marketing and getting inorganic customers, right?
It's
so
a massive problem, I guess.
which is a huge problem, right?
Okay.
Like I told you this, while this idea came up 10 years ago, I've been saving adventure operator links for about 8 years, right? When I looked at that, when I looked at that database, I had about 400 websites about a couple of years ago. When I started I opened 400 links in a matter of a month's time before deciding on this. Out of those 400, about 150 did not exist, right? So a lot of those companies die very quickly, right? So we walk into an adventure operator's office and tell them, we're going to help you with your biggest problem, which is sales, right? And that's what we're going to do for you. And that typically breaks the ice, right? More often than not, right? So we start with that. And then, we don't want to walk in and tell somebody how to run their business from A to Z, right? So we focus on the marketing piece for now. And then we're going to go in and then over a period of time, we want to also help them on other areas. But for now, we are focused on marketing and sales.
okay, nice.
So it took you 10 years to take this decision. Yeah. Why not after 1 year? Why not after 2 years?
Multiple things, right? The internet wasn't ready then. The Indian internet space, eco space wasn't ready then. I wasn't ready then. I didn't have enough money. I didn't know what a marketplace was, right?
Kulaba market.
It's so simple, man. I mean, like,
What is this, Amit?
In the late 2000s, Airbnb played a big role, right? Like we saw that so there was eBay, and eBay was great, right? And our original model was around eBay. And then eventually we saw Airbnb and what they did with a single product. And we said, that's us. That's exactly what we want to do. And then, we went from there. So we used eBay and Airbnb. So we had a lot of learning to do as well, right? Also, the adventure space in India wasn't mature. It still isn't mature, right? So 10 years ago, it was definitely not mature.
You know what, Amit? I'd like to end this podcast on one question. Okay, what's next for the Great Next?
what's your Great Next with the Great Next?
Hey, mine was better.
Mine's better.
My Great Next is a trek in Sikkim called the Green Lake Trek. So that is something that will happen next summer.
Wow.
That's my personal Great Next. For us as a company, we are fighting a battle. We don't have one Great Next. We are fighting a battle on multiple fronts, on sales, on funding, on recruitment, on content, and a whole bunch of things. But if gun to my head, if it was one of them, it would be sales, right? And things are picking up. Things are looking good. So I can't complain. So for the Great Next is more sales.
Insane. Like, I don't think you could have put it more bluntly.
I'm going to urge and encourage every listener to go to www.thegreatnext.com and just check the amazing
And just
set.
tease Amit. Okay, just spend a lot of time on the website. Click on random things.
Yeah, click on all those tours, have
Don't
fun.
buy anything. Just let us average
Just keep
time.
calling him up, like at least 5 to 6 times, asking the most ridiculous questions, and hopefully book a trip.
Oh, man. It was so fantastic. Amit, it was an insanely good time having you here. And on this note,
We'll sign off.
Yeah, we'll sign off.
Thanks a lot, guys.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.
That's Munaf Kapadia, and this is Nabil Merchant on My Neighbour Zuckerberg.
That was an episode of My Neighbour Zuckerberg, brought to you by Indus Vox Media and media partners Inc. 42.
Hey man, just help me out, man. I need some podcast, man. I haven't had a fix in a week. Just need some.
Don't you worry about it. I got podcast galore for you, man. Just go to ivmpodcast.com. You can also find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Thanks, man. I'm gonna check it out.